I'm gonna introduce my friend Stephanie, who helped me put this panel together. I'm a strong advocate of third parties, and the theme of this panel is gonna be why. And the theme of this panel, I want to hear from you guys from why you guys believe it's important to build a third-party movement, why you guys think it's important to resist two-party duopoly, and what role does the Green Party movement has with labor organizing and fighting the system in general. But thank you for putting this panel together. Thank you, Stephanie, for joining us. We also have Cindy A. Matthews. I'm going to pass it to you guys so you guys can introduce yourself individually here soon. We also have Ed Grystar. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. I appreciate you joining us as well for this Green Party panel. We are also joined, she joined us earlier this week. It's great to have former presidential candidate for third party under the Green Party, Dr. Joe Stein. I appreciate you making time joining us today. So I want to start with Stephanie, and we're going to work our way around the panel, and we're going to get to Dr. Stein. And the general question is, what got you interested in building third party, and why you guys think organizing outside the two-party system is so important for organizing in general? I'm going to pass to Stephanie. Yeah. Thank you for getting everything set up.
Hey, yeah, thanks for inviting us. We're very happy to be here. My name is Stephanie Voltolin, and I actually in college belonged to the UAW, the Auto Workers Union. When you, back then in the 80s, when you joined, or whenever you went to go work for General Motors, you automatically were enrolled in the union. You didn't have any opt-out, and they took the dues out of your paycheck. And so I was very strong union very early on in my life, and I saw the value. And here's what happened. My friends were all working non-union jobs, making about $3.25 an hour. I was making $15 an hour in a union job. And if I worked overtime, it was time and a half. And if I worked weekends, it was double time. So I made about 10 times in the summer what they did because of a union. And so, I saw the value in that very early on. I also saw about that time was about the beginning of Ronald Reagan's second term. And he began, and that's when unions, bosses started getting bought out. You would hear people talk about it. You'd hear about them saying those, the bosses were getting a little too comfortable, and they were snugging up to the Democrats and the Republicans. And so, it became very clear to me early on that third party, especially the Green Party, which I'm sure you guys know is the largest U.S. party that doesn't take corporate money, is just a good fit. So that's sort of what's brought me here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I appreciate you for making time for us as well, Dr. Joe Stein. I know you don't have a lot of time. You gave us a lot of time earlier this week. We had a great conversation with Shama, so that's why I appreciate you joining us today for the Labor Organizing Summit. I know you don't have a lot of time, so I want to pass it to you. The overall theme of this panel will be the importance of a third party, the importance and the role that the Green Party can play for labor organizing. So I want to get your thoughts on that, and I'm glad that you was able to make it. And I know you don't have a ton of time, but I want to get your thoughts on that.
Great. And thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for giving me a chance to support this wonderful panel. And I want to give a big shout out and hi, especially to Stephanie, because we keep crossing paths in cyberspace. And I'm just really grateful for everything you're doing and everybody on this panel. So, and I should just say also that for many years, many of us in the Green Party have been talking about how we have to really lift up our labor action, and that we really need a specific labor caucus or a labor subcommittee, which for some reason we don't have, and in the same way that we have a women's committee, and we have an environmental and a climate committee. I think it's really time for us to start our specific labor committee. And I'd love to follow up on that with people, because we tend to be very involved in our local labor struggles as a party, but we're not as a party, we are not kind of sharing our best practices and the fights that we're fighting. And we could be doing a lot of supporting each other's labor struggles. I think if we could get it more organized, including really at the national level to support all the local work that's going on. And I won't say too much, because I said an awful lot earlier this week on that wonderful forum with Shama. And, I kind of came into this, growing up in the civil rights movement and the women's movement and the anti-war movement, the anti-Vietnam movement in the 70s, really, and the 60s, and was involved in the early student strikes and, shutting down our universities on all of those counts. And, then I became very active later on once I kind of had been through my training and I was then involved in healthcare, saw how everybody was getting screwed on healthcare and really the impossibility of providing healthcare in a predatory healthcare system. It just can't be done. And how healthcare, as we think of it, is really just, it's window dressing. It's window dressing on a crisis of health of our society and the health of our families and, the health of our environment. It's all kind of victim of a predatory system where the oligarchs are calling the shots. And in healthcare, I especially saw how environmental destruction was really hurting people enormously. And at the time, the epidemic of asthma was new, if you can believe it. My era didn't grow up with that. And it was really just kind of hitting in the 70s, really. And childhood cancers were on the rise. And, a number of like developmental disabilities were kind of really very clear and prominent and a big struggle. And I became involved in initially really fighting environmental racism and working with communities to resist coal plants and toxic waste sites and degradation of the water supply and lead and stuff like that. And again, experienced how incredibly rigged the whole system is and that we really needed a much bigger fight. And in particular, that we needed to be fighting together with labor. Labor in particular was really critical for fighting this battle and any battle. And that was kind of like my back door into labor struggles. And everything that I've learned since then just really affirms that working people and people who are out of a job, that it's like surviving, it's putting food on the table, it's being able to afford a home, and healthcare. And for lack of healthcare, I should say for poverty, poverty is now the fourth leading cause of mortality in the United States. It's the fourth leading cause. And all these things still come together that economic issues are really front and center for most people. They are front and center. They're the struggle to keep from getting evicted, the struggle to afford your rent, which is going up every day, the struggle to afford your health care. And that as working people, that's where push comes to shove, and that's where people have the tool of going on strike and building towards a bigger and more general strike. And it's been just really clear to me as a climate activist for many years that we are not going to solve this without a general strike. And in order to get to a general strike, it's working people who are leading the way through their fights in the workplaces. So this is just a big shout out to everybody on this panel, but also everybody involved in this really wonderful session today, which is, just so grounding and so inspiring. I've been able to watch little pieces of it and really look forward to going back and looking at the whole thing. So this is just really exciting. And politics, as Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. And the unions need to bring that demand. Workers need to bring that demand and lead that demand in the workplace. But we cannot give power a pass. We cannot give them a pass in the voting booth. We cannot give them a free lunch in elections, because left to their own devices, they will just continue throwing us over the cliff. We've already been thrown under the bus, and we're about to go over the cliff here as a society and an economy, and our healthcare system. The climate is on fire right now, and it hurts no one more than frontline communities in this country and around the world. So, this is a unified battle. We need to stand up and fight, and that includes putting power on notice that we are not going to take it anymore, and to not challenge power is not okay. We can't leave that out. It's essential, and it's none of these pieces are expendable. We cannot do without the social movements and the power of workers to really lead those movements. We also cannot do without holding power accountable. And if we do not challenge power, then we're not holding them accountable. We need to hold their feet to the fire, and we need to throw the bums out. They know that's happening. They may be losing battles, but they're losing the war. And if you look at the numbers and the statistics, people they've lost it. They want to call out spoilers. They want to call out third parties as spoilers. Spoiling what? Spoiling their stranglehold of these white old guys, basically the James Carvilles and the likes. They want to keep a stranglehold on the system, and now they are whining up the wazoo because their stranglehold is being spoiled. Well, what's being spoiled for working people is our lives and our health, and and our very tentative hold on the future, which is really crumbling before our very eyes right now. So they lost it. When Obama bailed out the banks and threw out homeowners, and 7 million families, whatever it was, lost their homes and got evicted. That was the turning point, I think, and that's where the Democrats lost 1,000 seats in state legislatures. That's where they lost 60 some seats in Congress, and they lost 13 seats in the Senate, and they lost 12 governorships. So it was spoiled for them by their own action at their own hand, and they're just trying to blame it. What did Greens have to do with that in 2010? Losing 1,000 legislative seats? Nothing. This is BS. And it should be treated as that. And I think not even given the time of day. We have a job to do. That's all about our organizing and building our power. And at the end of the day, that comes down to the general strike. And if we're ever going to get to the general strike, we need to also support the specific workplace strikes along the way, whether it's UPS and the upcoming vote, whether it's Amazon, Starbucks, et cetera. And, I really appreciated that little introduction, CJ, that you were doing this morning with a case study.
Oh, yes.
So great.
Yes.
So it's just really
good. I like that.
These tools here are just really important, I think, for empowering us. So thanks to you. Thanks to everybody. And I'm sorry I can't stick around, but I will come back and watch this at a later date. And
well, thank you for coming. For the time that you are able to provide, we do appreciate it.
Yeah, that was a very powerful, inspiring, and thought-provoking little speech, Dr. Stein. So we appreciate you making time. We had a much longer conversation earlier this week. If you guys want to check it out, so we appreciate you showing up for the Green Party panel. I'll put you in the back, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this panel. I want to get to Ed Grystar. What role do you think the Green Party has in terms of labor organizing and pushing for general progressive change? And what got you, so the audience know who you are, you can kind of explain what got you into organizing with the Green Party and what led you to pull the trigger on that. So thank you for joining us, Ed, and I'll pass it to you so you can share your thoughts.
Okay, thank you, Ed Grystar. I'm with National Single Payer. I've been a lifelong organizer with a number of different unions. My last union that I worked for and helped was the nurses union in Pennsylvania. But I started out working in a steel mill, and one of my first issues was actually working in a steel mill in 1970 when Nixon passed OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Act. You could never, that should give people like a barometer of where we're at. And so OSHA was passed. There was no protections in the mill. One of the things that drew people together was literally, as far as healthcare goes, we were right. This was in Western Pennsylvania. We were right next to many coal miners that are going on strike in Western Pennsylvania, in West Virginia, because of black lung. Their union leadership was opposed to fighting for black lung. The workers themselves had to take control and push their union leaders out. And so I think I would like to flip the talk and say, well, how is it that the labor movement is losing people today and is weak and ineffective, when the reality is it should be on the ascendancy? There should be more struggles, more mass demonstrations and everything. And I think what it comes down to is that there is literally a lack of class consciousness in the labor movement, especially among the leadership. And that's really what's holding us back. Like, for instance, this morning, I was in Erie, Pennsylvania, where the United Electrical Workers are on strike. 1,500 of them are on strike. They have scabs in the plant. And we are up there in solidarity, some green people, some environmental people, because one of the issues there is they're talking about green locomotives and green sustainability jobs. So when we're there, one of the big issues, and I'm there speaking on healthcare. So the workers come up to me and they say, you know what, you're talking about single payer healthcare. Do you know what our proposal is from the company? The company's proposal is a $10,000 deductible before you get any healthcare benefits. Now, the point I'm trying to raise here is that you as a union, you can't keep that issue silent. You have to reach out, because many of the people in Erie and everywhere in this country face disastrous junk insurance plans. The union and all of labor should be fighting to say that we're for Medicare for all. We're invigorating the labor movement. We're reaching out to people. The other thing is only approximately 12% of the actors that are on strike actually work enough hours to get benefits from their union healthcare fund. So what about, in most of them, and to get benefits, they have to make $26,000 a year. So many of these people don't have health care. People around the country don't have health care. And instead of the AFL-CIO pushing for Medicare for all, like 10 years ago, there were 600 unions that endorsed Medicare for all. Today, they're actually literally selling Medicare Advantage plans. The unions,
oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, they're selling Medicare. And so what we have to do, we, meaning the people who are interested, and I think there is a budding, growing, more conscious movement out there, and this program and like it we have the capability of interjecting the ideology that's literally necessary, not only just to move the unions forward, but also to lay the groundwork so that people understand the ineffectiveness of the duopoly. The only way people are going to understand that their unions don't represent them and that the issues are much greater is if people go to the union and they say, well, why aren't we fighting for Medicare for all? We have, people don't have jobs. They can't get rent. The food is everything is in a state of crisis. So if you take the Teamsters, you take the UE, you take the potential auto workers, and you take the actors, if all of those unions, and this is what we need, is a class conscious labor movement that would unite all of these various struggles into a broader social movement, because literally that's the only thing that has gotten us any benefit in this country. And everything is being under attack. Yet instead of that, we have people in the single payer movement that say it's time to literally give up. We should go back to incrementalism. Even though the majority of people desperately need healthcare for all, and they're willing and they're still supportive of it, even though there's like a whiteout, a blackout from the media and from most organizations. They aren't pushing it, especially the Democrats. So what do we have to do? We have to create greater consciousness among the rank and file. And by doing so, they will then begin to develop an understanding this two-party system simply cannot represent them. They will begin to understand, and if the unions push the issues, like if you took 5 issues that all these unions are facing, whether it's auto workers, whether it's, like I said, Teamsters, whether it's electrical workers, if you took 5 of those issues and you took them to the general public and you said, these are the issues that we should be fighting for, and what we're going to do is we're going to put our energy and our resources into things like this, you would begin to shift the balance of power. And that's not going to come. It's growing. And I hear Dr. Stein talk about a general strike. Well, frankly, we're way away from a general strike. Why? Because we simply don't have the class consciousness, the organizational ability, the capability of pulling this off. Do we need it? Of course. But how do you do it? In the Green Party, one of the weaknesses I see of the Green Party is that they're not, as I think Dr. Stein said, they're not focused, or they haven't been focused. And I'm glad I see this changing, because I've been around the Green Party for a while too, changing into more identity with issues of the mass of people. Now, what are those issues? I just kind of went over all of them. The gut level economic issues, that's what's going to unite people. And if you don't concentrate on those issues, like, for instance, the military budget, how could you say that you're for an environmental program with all of these ridiculous, environmental groups? They never talk about the military budget, the biggest polluter in the world. And you got to be able to connect that to the people's self-interest. And I think if you get your head together and you get your facts together and you have the confidence, you can win people over to this. And that's really how labor was built. Labor was built by talking to people. Some people have this mythical idea that somehow John L. Lewis parachuted from the sky, was delivered by Hosanna, and he organized all the workers, which is just basically bullshit. The way he organized those people was because there were left-wing unions for a decade before that were building the ground, fertilizing the soil, making sure that people were in action. And when they were in motion, that's when the CIO was formed, and John L. Lewis then gave it some resources and things like that. So you got to know your own history. And I think the Green Party, we have a capability of doing some things, but it can't be done unless we make sure that our message resonates with the average person. And inside unions, we have to do the same thing. We have to literally, and it's not easy. If fighting those union people, because I've done it before, I would always say, and the last thing I'll say is in the 1980s, when they were trying to overthrow the government in Nicaragua and El Salvador, I was the president of a labor council in Western PA. We had workers, trade unionists from El Salvador and Nicaragua come here, and rather than the AFL-CIO saying, hey, this is a great thing to do, they would call me up on the telephone and say, you're violating the policy of the AFL-CIO by having
Jesus Christ.
But what I'm saying is, this is a reflection of the kind of dead wood that populates most of the labor movement. And it's time to just call it out. It really is, because it's not going to take us anywhere. And many people, young people, they say, hey, I'm joining a union. And I tell them, well, that's really good. I mean, all unions are good. But the real question is, what kind of a union do you really need? Do you need a union that's just going to collect your dues? You need a union that's just going to cozy up to the boss? And that's going to just bring demoralization and confusion. You need a union that's going to struggle. And that's up to the people now. And that's really what we have to interject in ourselves, because we do have the possibilities. The public, I think, is sympathetic. There's a huge political disconnect. And the progress is when we could start making a difference and being that 3 or 4 or 5% that can make a difference. And we can't go back. We have to just push forward and do what we're doing, because this is a lifelong battle.